Thank you all very much. That's very nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you all of you for the invitation. I'm happy to be back here to be with all of you and discuss the issues that are of common concern, not only for your community, but for our nation as a whole. Hector started to talk about what we've done in New Jersey and the efforts that we've made there, and that's where I'd like to start. First, I don't believe that there's any issue that's more universally important in communities all across America than the issue of educational access and excellence in education for our children and for our grandchildren. This is something where I think we're failing. We're failing significantly, and not only in the way we relate to the rest of the world, but we're failing in the communities that need this educational opportunity the most. And we're doing it, I believe, because we're not listening. We're not listening to the parents in these communities. We're not listening to the educators in these communities. We're not listening to the children in these communities. You see, for 40 or 50 years now, the folks who have been the largest advocates for our current system of education have continued to tell folks, especially folks in economically disadvantaged communities, wait, we'll spend some more money and we'll fix this for you, and your schools and your education will get better. The simple fact of the matter is that for the overwhelming majority of folks in those economically challenged communities, it hasn't been true. And the people who know this better than anyone are the parents in those communities. Many of them are the product of that very education system where their children are now being underserved. And they watch as many of their children, despite the God-given gifts they have, fall further and further behind. And what they want is to be able to choose for their children where they can best be educated. And that especially in places where that education is not up to par. We need to give those folks, regardless of their economic circumstance, the freedom to be able to make those choices. I've been talking about this for 5.5 years in New Jersey, and we've started a very robust public school choice program. In fact, our public school choice program in New Jersey is now oversubscribed. We have to continue to add money to it every year because parents are voting with their feet in the public school system. In my view, we need to do that with private and parochial schools as well. Fact is that parents should have the right to choose where their children go to school, and we have placed enough money into this system, believe me, that should not be the impediment to it. And when I say a lot of money, think about this. You'll recognize these communities in my state. In the city of Newark, we spend $26,000 per pupil per year on K-12 education. In the city of Camden, we spend $27,000 per pupil per year on K-12 education. In the city of Asbury Park, New Jersey, we spend $30,000 per pupil per year. Yet, 3 years ago, the graduating class at Asbury Park High School, over 50% of them read a grade level upon graduation. After spending nearly $120,000 on their high school career. Money is not the issue here, everybody. There's enough money in the system. It's got to be spent differently. And we need to work together, in my view, to do that. And this is not just my idea. This is the plea I've heard from so many folks in these communities. And the way you know it is when charter schools are open in those communities, they are wildly oversubscribed. In Newark right now, we have thousands of children on the waiting list for charter schools. Thousands. And their future, in many ways, is determined by a ping pong ball being picked out of a barrel. Does theirs get selected or doesn't it? That shouldn't be the way we determine success or failure in our society. Government shouldn't be picking the winners and losers. Winners and losers should be determined by your work ethic, by your ingenuity, by your innovation. That's what should determine winners and losers. It always has in America, but this educational system is preventing us from doing it for every child, and it is particularly hurting children in economically challenged communities and children who face other educational challenges along the way. I don't believe that this community, the Latino community, should accept any longer the idea that they have to accept in certain of their communities education that's substandard, or that they should have to wait any longer for a solution that obviously is not coming. What has always brought solutions in our society? Competition. Competition has always brought solution and excellence in our society. In the same way that I look at education, I look at the business community. The business community throughout our state, as you know, New Jersey is the most ethnically diverse state in America. And so there are neighborhoods in communities in every corner of New Jersey where you can come from any corner of this globe and find a place where you can live with folks who understand your culture, what motivates you, and can work to make your American dream become what it is. I am the product of an Irish father and a Sicilian mother. You know what this means, everybody. This means that very early on in my life, I became an expert at dispute resolution. My Sicilian grandfather was born on the boat between Sicily and the United States. My mother used to tease him all the time. That meant he was a citizen of nowhere. That he wasn't Sicilian and he wasn't American. He was very angry about this. He used to really, I can remember as a young child, him getting very angry. My mother would tease him about this. And he would say, I'm an American. When I landed at Ellis Island, they made me an American. My grandfather came here, brought by his mother and father, because they wanted the opportunity to work in a place where they could live freely and have limitless opportunity. Our country has been built on the idea that men and women from all over the world looked to America as the place where there were no limits on their dreams, that the only limitation would be the goodness of their soul, the greatness of their idea, and the level of their work ethic. That's what's made America the great country it is. And as I travel around to communities all across New Jersey, you see examples of this every day in small businesses that are being started all across New Jersey by folks who have immigrated here because they believe in the goodness of their soul, the greatness of their idea, and the level of their work ethic. And so as I traveled around as governor of New Jersey during my first 4 years, I said to these community members, tell me what it is that gets in your way from hiring more people. Tell me what gets in your way from bringing more money home for your family. Tell me what gets in your way from realizing those dreams that brought you here in the first place, or brought your parents here in the first place, or brought your grandparents here in the first place. Almost invariably, I heard from folks that it was three things. First was the overwhelming amount of regulation by government. That small business people don't have a lawyer on staff, can't afford to hire 2 or 3 people to fill out the paperwork. And they get overwhelmed by what government places on them. In my state, for instance, in the first year I was governor, we got rid of 1/3 of the regulations put into effect by my predecessor, John Corzine. And we felt the reaction from businesses all throughout New Jersey. And those businesses that started small businesses, you know, based upon those three things: the goodness of the soul, the greatness of the idea, and the level of the work ethic. You never know where those businesses are going to lead to. And so last month, I stood at the ribbon cutting for an enormous new world headquarters facility for Goya Foods in my state. That family started that company, as you know, as a small business, started by immigrants here in this country. It is now the largest business of its kind in the world, and it's headquartered in my state. And as I stood with the Unanaway family to cut the ribbon for this business, they did what to me was the best indicator of the strength and power of your community is. The CEO of the company could have stood up there by himself with the governor and cut the ribbon. He called up every member of the Unanaway family that had anything to do with the continuing success of Goya Foods. We had 40 to 50 people up on that stage, to the point where he didn't really know how many people were going to be called up, and it kept coming and coming and coming. And we were on kind of a stage a little bit like this, and he turned to me and he said, "Governor, I can't guarantee you it's not going to collapse." I said to him, "Well, it's time, Mr. Unanaway, for some prayer then, to make sure it doesn't." The development of that company is a symbol of what is possible if we get government out of the way. Second thing is access to capital. And this is where, again, the overarching hand of Washington in my view, has really hurt, especially minority-owned businesses. The loans, the seed capital for those businesses. Local community banker who knows them and knows their family and is willing to take a chance on them. And the examples are not just in the business community, they're not just in the educational field, but they're also in government as well. And we've worked enormously hard with our Latino community in New Jersey, and we have doubled the amount of Latino employment in the state government since I've been governor. At every different level, from the cabinet level on down to entry-level jobs as well. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because we listened to each other. We worked together as a community to say this is an important goal to reach, and we need to reach it together. So, whether you want examples for children and grandchildren to aspire to a career in government, or whether you want examples in the entrepreneurial community or the educational community, we need to work together and listen to each other and help to see that those opportunities become real. The last thing I'll tell you about our experience in New Jersey and how I think it's applicable to the rest of the country is in the way we speak to and about each other. And my party, quite frankly, has been guilty in some respects of speaking in a way that doesn't sound very welcoming to new members. You know, any club that you might want to join, even if you agree with all the principles of that club, or most of them, the club doesn't sound like it's welcoming you. You're not going to come. no matter how much you might agree with it. In New Jersey, part of what we said was that we had to start a new day in the relationship between the governor as the leader of the Republican Party in New Jersey and all the different communities in our state. As I said before, when you lead the most ethnically diverse state in America, you don't have the luxury of only leading and listening to those people who voted for you. The first time when I was elected, I got 48.5% of the vote, which means that 51.5% of the people voted for somebody else. And so it was acute to me that we had to reach out to those communities to make sure that they knew they were being listened to, had input, and that we worked together. Now, as I traveled around New Jersey to do this, my tone was always the same. What can I learn from you? What have you always wanted to say to a governor but never had the opportunity to say? Where are we going wrong? Where has the government made mistakes that we together can fix? And those meetings happen dozens and dozens and dozens of times in churches and synagogues. They happened in VFW halls and American Legion halls. They happened in small businesses. They happened in schools, in their gyms, and their cafeterias. They happened anywhere people would be willing to meet. And what happened as a result? What happened as a result was that we finally did begin to listen to each other. And folks were willing to sit and share not only their ideas, but their feelings. And I can tell you that whether it was at a school in a predominantly Latino neighborhood, whether it was in an African American church, or whether it was at a business owned by an Asian American, I learned a lot. And I know it helped to make me a better leader. And so then what happened when I offered myself for leadership again? It belied the myth that's put out by some in our political class that certain Americans will only vote for a certain party. It's just not true. We know it's not true. And we were able to demonstrate that in New Jersey, not through tricks and games and not through any special advertising or metadata or data mining. No, through old-fashioned hard work, where the leader goes to the people that he's fortunate enough to serve and closes his mouth for a little while and opens his ears. And so what happened? As Hector said, on election night 2013, we won 51% of the Latino vote in New Jersey. No one ever thought that it would be possible in today's climate for a Republican to win 51% of the vote. By the way, as you all know, in a Democratic state. I mean, let's stop here for a second. And we're not talking about Oklahoma. And we're talking about New Jersey. And in New Jersey, there's 750,000 more Democrats than Republicans. In New Jersey, before I was elected in 2009, we hadn't elected a Republican statewide in anything in 12 years. And we still not elected a Republican to the United States Senate in 42 years. 1972 was the last time New Jersey elected a Republican to the U.S. Senate. The longest streak of any state in America. So everybody can talk about different blue states. This is a blue state. I think having it happen in New Jersey is an even greater encouragement to the rest of the country. Because if Latinos in New Jersey voted 51% for a Republican governor, not on the come, when you didn't know what he would do as governor, but after 4 years of governing, that tells you that if we change the way we interact with each other, if we treat each other with respect, even when we disagree, that we can bring people together. And it didn't just happen in the Latino community. In 2009, I had 9% of the African American vote in New Jersey. In 2013, I got 22% of the African American vote in New Jersey. More than doubling our African American vote. And when we went to African American churches throughout New Jersey, one of the pastor of the largest African American church in our largest city of Newark, who supported us for re-election when he did not support us the first time, said we need to give this governor a chance because he's been with us and he's listened to our concerns and he's trying to work with us to address them. And in a race where they say Republicans have a gender gap, and I ran against a female opponent, we got 56% of the female vote in New Jersey. This isn't because I talked about what some people call women's issues. To me, that's insulting to women. Women don't have women's issues, they have issues. They have issues that they care deeply about the same way that men care deeply about issues. And many of the same issues are cared about deeply by men and women. What you need to do is speak honestly to people. And I've come here today to say to all of you that now is the time for us to start a great dialogue in our country that is not accusatory, that is not looking in the rearview mirror, but is looking through the windshield. That we need to start anew with each other. But the obligation for us to do that is first upon the leaders. If you want to be a leader in this country, you need to first reach your hand out and change the tone of our national conversation and give all people who care about this country a meaningful seat at the table, to be able to express their views, and to know that those views will be listened to. And note I said listen to. Not always agreed with. Listen to. I live in New Jersey. I get disagreed with every day. Like every minute of every day. Right? If we're going to be sensitive about honest disagreements, we're not going to get very far. But let's establish common ground with each other. And let's be honest with each other and smart with each other about our views and our feelings. That's when you develop a coalition that can change the course of history. I want to end where I started. Remember I told you about those three elements, right? The goodness of the soul, the greatness of the idea, and the level of the work ethic. That's not only what should determine success for each individual in America, that's the way we should judge our leaders as well. We shouldn't judge them any other way, in my view. If we judge a leader to have goodness in his or her soul, that they have ideas that aspire to greatness for our country, not the lowest common denominator, and that they are willing to work as hard as they need to be able to build the coalition we need in this country to move our country to have the 21st century be the second American century. That regardless of party, those are the leaders we should be looking for. And those are the folks we should be supporting. And so, I came here today to continue the dialogue that I've been having in New Jersey over the last nearly 6 years. And I can tell you that I am completely flattered to have gotten this invitation today. What you do each and every day in the states where you live makes an enormous difference. And that you gather all here in our nation's capital on the 20th anniversary to not only celebrate what's happened, but to plan what needs to be done should be encouraging to every person in America. And it is encouraging to me. And so that's why I've come. I want to be a part of that discussion. I want to be a part of that debate. And I want to be part of the leadership that brings our country to new heights through the power and the goodness of each individual that makes up this country. If we can do that, we will be setting an extraordinary example for the next generation who will take over from all of us. And then we can put our heads on our pillows at night that most solemn but unwritten obligation for every American. And that is to leave this country better for the next generation than it was left to us. I can tell you this, I don't want to be part of that generation that fails that test for the very first time in our country's over 230-year history. And I'll end with this quote, because it comes from one of the founding fathers that I admire the most. They were all extraordinary people. But one of them had a reputation of being kind of blunt and direct, and at times a little tempestuous. Don't know why I like this guy so much. But his name was John Adams. And Adams sacrificed greatly to help to establish this country. Lots of time away from his family. Overseas, out of Massachusetts down to Philadelphia and elsewhere to help to establish this country, was one of the people who, with Jefferson, wrote the Declaration of Independence, where I think is one of the single greatest documents ever authored about the rights of human beings. And Adams, after having served in so many capacities in our government, including President of the United States, when he was near his death, we were approaching the 50th anniversary of our country, and Adams was concerned that our country was adrift, that people were taking for granted the freedoms and liberties that we had, and that this country that he had sacrificed so much with others to help to create might not survive. So Adams began to write in his diary for posterity, for us. He didn't know any of us. This was a long, long time ago. But he was writing for us to pay attention to. And here's what he said in part of it. He said, "You shall never know the sacrifices that were made to secure for you your liberty. I pray you shall make a good use of it. For if you do not, I shall repent in heaven for ever having made the sacrifice at all." That's the solemn obligation that I refer to, put in words greater than I could ever say. None of us will ever know fully the sacrifices that were made to secure for us this extraordinary liberty that we have. But all those who come before us ask is that we make a good use of it. I do not, nor do I think any of you in this room want to be the cause of Adams repenting in heaven. Because when he repents, he will repent loudly. We know that about John Adams. We don't want to be the cause of that. So let us commit to each other to start a new national conversation that allows us to keep that solemn obligation that he set out so brilliantly in his diary. I'm willing to be a part of that fight if all of you are. I thank you for letting me come today, and I look forward to taking a few questions from everyone. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Governor Christie. That was a wonderful presentation, and we really appreciate the fact that you were here. We know you have this busy job as Governor and CEO of your state, and I know you're in the middle of a bunch of things, so it means a lot to us that you would take time to be with us today. And thank you for starting this conversation. It's an important conversation for our country, not just our community. We all know, and I know that you know, that the Latino community is part of the solution. Oftentimes when we talk about the Latino community, especially in the media, they talk about the things that don't work, but you know the things that do work. So let me ask you a couple of questions. And by the way, I see former Congressman Don Manzula from Illinois, the former chairman of the Small Business Committee, the chairman when I was there. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman. Appreciate it. So, there's a lot of issues that are important in the Latino community. You talked about a lot of them. But, and you know this, the most important issue is economic. It's the economic issue. We sometimes get lost with some of the other issues. You know that in the United States, there's 3 million Hispanic companies. They generate $500 billion in revenue. And those numbers could double every 5 years if we had the right environment for those small businesses. I know that you work on this in your state, but hypothetically, if you lived in that house across the street, what would you do to create an environment for all of these millions of small businesses?
Well, it's a good question, thank you. First off, We have to change the tax system in this country, both for individuals and for companies. It's destructive. And the only evidence we need is to look at the fact that we're in the midst of the weakest recovery from a recession in the post-World War II period. That, we have folks running around taking a bow for 2% GDP growth. This is unthinkable to those of us who lived through the 1980s and the 1990s, where we saw GDP growth at double or more of that. And I believe there's three major reasons for this problem. The first one is the individual tax system, which has become so complicated. Now, this is the part of my presentation my father hates the most because he's a CPA. So he's like, why do you want to change the tax code to make it easier, put us all out of business? But the fact is we need to. And I think, and I've said this earlier, we need to do a few things. First is to restrict it to 3 rates. There should be 3 rates in this country. The highest should be 28%, which is where it was when President Reagan did his bipartisan tax reform in 1986. That led to even more economic growth in our country. And the lowest should be in the single digits. And we should get rid of most of the deductions, except for home mortgage interest deduction and charitable contributions. Most of the rest of them need to go. And then people will be able to do their taxes in 15 minutes, not 15 days. And that'll be a relief to those business people you're talking about that have the small businesses that file as individuals. That'll be great. Second, for our bigger businesses, our corporate tax rate is the highest in the world. It's 35%. We need to lower that to 25%, with the same getting rid of loopholes and deductions that I talked about on the individual side. But we also have $2 trillion of profits from American companies earned overseas that don't come back home. Why don't they come back home? Because unlike most nations in the world, America, North Korea, and a few others tax that twice. They don't recognize the tax you pay in the foreign country, and then they want you to come back here and pay 35% again after you pay taxes overseas. And so what do smart business people do? They don't bring it home. And so people who criticize lowering the corporate business tax rate, I say that 35% of zero is zero. 35% on money that never comes back here gets nothing for the United States Treasury, and worse yet, doesn't invest in companies in the United States that can help create jobs and opportunity. So we need to have a one-time repatriation of that money back to the United States, tax it at 8.75%, but require that it be invested in capital improvements and jobs here in the United States. If you do that, that money will come home. I guarantee you it will come home. And if you don't, it probably won't. That's going to help to create a better business environment here. Last thing I alluded to before is on regulation. Do you know that last year, 2014, the Obama administration issued 41,000 new pages of federal regulation in 1 year? It's a record, an all-time record. And they added on to all the regulation that's been piled up over the last 5 years before that. Fact is that that's unacceptable, and even the Small Business Administration has said that regulation from the federal government now costs every small business person in this country $10,000 per employee. $10,000 per employee. It is the hidden tax that every company, every business, small or large, has to pay for. So when I think New Jersey confronting the same thing, let's remember something. President Obama's EPA administrator for his first term and into his bit of his second, Lisa Jackson, she was the Department of Environmental Protection Commissioner in New Jersey before she came here. So while you're familiar with all the regulations that the EPA put out while she was here, she test drove all of that in New Jersey. So what did I do on the first day? I signed Executive Order number 1, which was to freeze any new regulation from any state department or agency in the state of New Jersey, and tasked the Lieutenant Governor to spend 90 days looking at all of the most recent regulation, meeting with business leaders, she held public meetings around the state to find out from them what are the most onerous regulations. And we got rid of 1/3 of those regulations inside the first year of our administration. It changed the business environment in our state. The same thing should happen at the federal level. The next president should sign an executive order on the first day freezing any new regulation. Well, we begin to look back at the monoliths of regulation that were put in by this last administration, and then have the task of getting rid of as much of that regulation as we can. I also think we should set a new rule, a net zero rule on regulation. You want to issue some new regulation, that's fine, you think it's necessary, but then you have to eliminate or sunset an equivalent amount of regulation, so we don't continue to add to this mountain. If we did those three things, along with a robust, smart national energy policy that exploits the resources that we've been given in this country and works with our neighbors in Canada and Mexico to make sure that we make North America the continent for energy in the 21st century, then you'll see economic growth at 4 or 5%. And then you're going to see an America that is leading the world in the 21st century economically, and it allows us to do so geopolitically as well.
Thank you for that, Governor Christie. One more question. It's a very important question in the Hispanic community. It's the issue of education. And you've talked about a little bit about this. You know, I live out in California, in Los Angeles, second largest school district in the United States. There are about 700,000 students in that school district, and they tell us that maybe half of them, which are mostly Latinos, will not graduate from high school. Now, I know that you fought the good fight. In fact, one of your most famous relationships is with the teachers union, and I want to know what advice that you could give us and our families on how we can be part of this conversation and really start doing some innovative things to give people more choice and more educational opportunities.
I would love to give some answer that was out of a white paper, that was, a silver bullet to educationally change the course of these folks. But let me tell you, everybody, this is raw politics. That's what it is. It's raw politics. And this community, the Latino community, has growing political influence in this country, and you need to use it. You need to use it to advocate for your children. The fact is, if those statistics are correct in Los Angeles, it is immoral that that's happening. Yet we have an educational system in this country that is designed for the comfort of adults, not to develop the potential of children. It is not to offend anyone. It's to make sure that everybody in the educational community still has a job, regardless of whether they're successful and good or whether they're awful. We have a 10-year system in this country that guarantees somebody a job after 3 years of work. I don't know about you, but after 3 years as a lawyer, they shouldn't have guaranteed me anything. I was still trying to figure out what I was doing. And anybody who starts a career knows that first 3 years is learning. And you can't judge for most except the most extraordinary after 3 years whether they're going to be a lifetime success or not. Yet, in our educational system, we say, survive the first 3 years, you have a job for life. We have an educational system which does not take into account the differences from community to community. We're still teaching the same way we did in the 1800s, for goodness sake. Rows of desks facing forward, looking at a blackboard or a whiteboard with one person standing in front of it from 8:30 in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon. Let me ask you something. In some of our economically challenged communities where mothers and fathers are working 2 or 3 or 4 jobs to keep a roof over the heads of their families, it's not that they don't want to be involved in their child's education. It's that they come home late, bone-tired, and simply can't. How do we justify the same length of school day for those children as we do for others? Those children need to have a longer school day, more instructional time, so they don't fall behind. Kids who come in with certain language challenges, they need longer school day, and we need to do this because it's the right thing to do. We know that the more time we spend with our children, whether it's us as parents or their teachers, the more they learn. Everybody in this room who has children, who has sat down to struggle through algebra, I said to my son a couple of weeks ago, my 14-year-old son who's taking algebra, my wife's very good at this. I am not. And I said, she said, Dad, can you help me with this problem? I said, Patrick, if a guy came into this house right now, put a gun to my head, and said, do this algebra problem or I'll blow your brains out, I would have said to him, shoot. Just shoot. Thank goodness he has his mother. But then when he needs to write the essay in his English class or his social studies class, he comes to me, and that I can help him with. Each one of us has had this experience, and we know how important it is in helping our children progress and develop their confidence. Well, if for any reason that can't be provided at home, we need to provide it at school, because it's not the fault of that child. Why do we still have a school year that's 8 months? Now, we know why this started in America, right? It's all because of the agrarian calendar. Right? Kids had to get out because they had to go and till the fields. Listen, I don't know what happens in your states, but I can tell you in New Jersey, I am confident that very few kids are leaving school next week to go home and till the fields. So why is it that we have to acknowledge this change in our society and adjust in our school calendar to make it a 10-month school year or an 11-month school year? Give them August off. They can go from September to July. This is the part of my talk that makes my children irate. So my father is now watching on C-SPAN, relieved that my children are getting angry as we speak. But here's the thing. There's only one reason why we don't have a longer school day and a longer school year. The teachers union. If you got a full-time salary for 8 months of work, would you want to work 11? Would you want to work a longer day if you weren't forced to? I mean, the fact is, the teachers, I believe, would be willing to do this. Because teachers, almost all of them that I've met in my life, go into that profession because they love children and they want to make a difference in their lives. Here's the problem. The teachers in this country need a union as good as they are, and they don't have it. But remember something else, everybody. This is where the raw politics comes in. In my state, for instance, years and years ago, the legislature passed a law and the governor signed it requiring every member of a public school system to be a member of the teachers union. Requiring them. And requiring them to pay dues to that union. In our state right now, it's $731 per employee per year. And it's taken directly out of their paycheck. We do it for them. Free of charge. And the wire transferred over to the teachers union. You know how many members of the teachers union in New Jersey? 200,000. Do the math, everybody. It's $140 million a year. And they don't pay a nickel towards teacher salary, teacher pension, or teacher health care. They have a $140 million slush fund to support their friends and to punish their enemies. And take my word for it. As a recipient of tens of millions of dollars of the punishment, they use it. So this can't be an intellectual conversation alone, everybody. You've got to decide that you want to stand up and fight for better schools for your kids. And that that's going to mean breaking some China. That's going to mean saying that the outsized influence of unions, teachers' unions, in our society is hurting the educational system. That when unions defend incompetent teachers, just because they're members of the union, which happens every day in every state in this country that has them, that's bad for kids. When they refuse to work a longer school year, that's bad for kids. When they refuse to work a longer school year, that's bad for kids. When they demand a full-time salary for a job that only is 8 months a year, that doesn't help kids. When we watch opposition to every attempt to insert competition into the public school system, that hurts kids. And it's meant for only one reason, that is to protect the union, its dues, and to keep growing its members. And how about this in New Jersey? Those benefits last for a lifetime. The health benefits that we give to teachers, they get for life. For life. And when I became governor of New Jersey, they paid nothing towards their health care. Zero. The taxpayers shouldered the entire bill from the day they were hired till the day they passed away. I don't know how that contributes to the growth of our children. So if you want to change this, it's not going to be a cricket match, everybody. This is going to be more like rugby. and less like cricket. And you've got to be willing to stand up and fight against interests no matter where they come from. Whether they're Republican or Democrat, whether they're liberal or conservative. That's the fight. And we as a country have been unwilling to have that fight. And that's why we're dropping in math ratings around the world. That's why we're dropping in science. That's why we're dropping in reading. And you cannot be a mid-rate educational system and be a first-rate power. So, if you're ready to start offending people, in order to achieve a greater goal, you found the right guy. I'm here to help offend people with you. Because I think the future of every child in this country is an individual gift from God. And it is immoral to not do everything we can to exploit the full potential that God has given to every one of our children. And we are failing that test today. And so other people come in here for you, they'll put a PowerPoint up and give you all these different educational statistics, forget it. We never get to that unless we win the first fight. The first fight is who's going to run the system? The union bosses or the parents who are relying upon this education to make their children great. So, that's my long answer for that.
Thank you, Governor Christie. Let's thank our special guest, Governor Christie.